Hey, my name is Drew Boa, founder of Husband Material, where I help men outgrow porn. Today, we are talking about reframing relapse. This episode is for everyone. Whether you have a regular pattern of using porn once a day or once a week or maybe even once a month, or if you've had success for months and maybe years on end, you will learn something really important about mindset. A mindset that can help you, and it can help you as you respond to others who might be really struggling. Some of you are doing really well, or you feel like you're making a lot of progress, and you have a friend who's not. And that can be really difficult. Well, this mindset that I'm going to teach you today is one of the key ingredients of long-term freedom from porn. It allows you to take a moment of a setback, a moment of sexually acting out, and actually turn it into momentum. Momentum into greater growth, healing, freedom, greater intimacy with God, and even greater self-compassion. Ultimately, what I want to teach you comes down to one sentence. And this is not new, by the way. I taught this previously in one of the very first episodes of Husband Material called How to Rebound from Relapse. If you take away just one thing from this episode, please make it this sentence. Reframe relapse. View it as feedback, not failure. Feedback, not failure. And specifically, I will teach you feedback about what? View it as feedback about the present, about the past, and about the future. But first, I want to tell you why not to view it as failure. Some of you might be thinking, well, a relapse is a failure, isn't it? And it's really common to hear guys talk about sexually acting out this way. Like, I messed up, I failed, I fell. Even the language of I relapsed can be confusing because technically speaking, you can only have a relapse if you have a certain amount of freedom. If you have a regular pattern of acting out and you actually don't have much freedom or sobriety, then if you go back and use porn, that's not technically a relapse, that's just a lack of freedom. We call that sexually acting out. Regardless, when we view these moments as failures, it does not help. And that's why I want you to use a different mindset, to use different language. And part of the reason why I believe it's not helpful to view relapse as a failure is because that tends to isolate this one part of our lives, sexuality, as the only area of moral performance or of spiritual success, is whether or not I've masturbated or not. And ultimately, that's a very, very small segment of life. If I'm going to call my relapse a failure, then to be consistent, I would need to call every single area of my life where I make a mistake or a moral choice that I'm not proud of also a failure. And if I keep looking at every single choice that I make through the lens of success or failure, it is incredibly damaging. Ultimately, it's going to make me feel like a failure or a success based on my behavior. And guys, that is just not helpful. While on the one hand, it is true that if I sexually act out, fantasize and masturbate with pornography, that is a failure, it doesn't actually help me to view it that way. What really does help is to view it as feedback. What can I learn from this? There's something here for me to see. There's something that God wants to teach me here. There's some way that I can grow. And ultimately, viewing a relapse as feedback, not failure, is what psychologists refer to as a growth mindset rather than a fixed mindset. This is actually one of the reasons why I talk about outgrowing porn, because a growth mindset is so powerful. This concept of the growth mindset and the fixed mindset comes from the research of Dr. Carol Dweck, and here's how she describes the difference. In a fixed mindset, your ability is static. When we view relapse as a failure, ultimately, that's feeding into a fixed mindset. I'm a failure. I'm no good. I'm a porn addict. feeds into this mindset of giving up easily and maybe even feeling threatened by the success of others. However, the opposite of a fixed mindset is a growth mindset where your ability can be developed. And this leads to a desire to learn and therefore a tendency to embrace challenges, persist in the face of setbacks, see effort as the path to mastery, to learn from criticism, and to find lessons and inspiration in the success of others. When you have a growth mindset, you're seeing this behavior as feedback, something important for you to learn from, information that is going to be helpful to you, that can ultimately help you change and grow. And the benefits of a growth mindset extend far beyond sexuality. I find a growth mindset is helpful for me in every area of life. As a husband, as a father, as somebody who's striving to be decent at a lot of things in life, and often falling short and failing. Rather than view my mistakes and my weaknesses and my poor choices as failures, when I choose to view them as feedback, it is so much more empowering. So I invite you to do the same. And specifically, when it comes to freedom from porn, let's talk about the 3 types of feedback that you can learn from a relapse. Number 1, a relapse is feedback about the present. So let me make this really practical and simple. After sexually acting out, you might think to yourself, wow, I was really, really sexually turned on. Those urges were overwhelming. But if you look more closely and you treat this relapse as feedback about what else might be going on in your life, you might find that you've actually been super stressed or lonely or anxious or depressed. Let me go into a little bit more detail about what I mean. One of the most common life experiences that relapse is trying to get your attention about is stress. In 2015, when I had my most recent relapse 7 years ago, it was in the middle of unprecedented stress for me after graduating from college. I was working very, very hard to try to pay the bills, working a tough job as an after-school teacher, and I was going to school on the side, and I was trying to do a church internship, and I had lost my sexual support group. I was overcommitted, I was overfunctioning, and of course, that stress needed an outlet, and the need to soothe was a lot stronger. It was also getting my attention about the loneliness that I felt. My best friend in the whole world, my best man at my wedding, had just gotten married and moved away, and I did not process that at all. In fact, I didn't even think it was affecting me. And I was so puzzled as to why I was struggling sexually. But when I look at it, I see, wow, this relapse is giving me some really clear feedback that I was stressed, I was lonely, I was anxious, especially after graduating from college where I had a great sense of community. I was feeling lonelier than ever. So these are some examples of how stress and loneliness might be showing up and might be making it a whole lot more difficult than it was previously in your life. It's very, very possible that you have been growing, that you have been healing, or that your friend has been growing and healing, but the challenges of life have also been increasing, especially in our world of COVID. Many of us are feeling extra stressed and extra lonely, extra anxious and extra depressed. And it makes a lot of sense that that would be a recipe for relapse. But relapse is not only feedback about the problems we're facing in the present, it's also feedback about the past. And if you want to go a little bit deeper into understanding the roots of what contributed to a relapse for yourself or for someone else, you have to ask the magic question. And the magic question is, when have I felt this way before? So let's take loneliness as a trigger. Let's say you get sick with COVID and you're alone for 5 days at your house. In the middle of this, sexual triggers are going through the roof, extremely difficult. And you act it out in ways that you hadn't in a long time. Ask yourself that question, when have I felt this way before? And you might get an answer like this. When I was alone in my house every day after school, all by myself. You might get a memory of when you experienced that loneliness before. Or maybe it's stress and it's reminding you of when you were alone at home and trying to complete your homework and not meeting deadlines and having no help from your parents and feeling way behind, feeling stupid. Or maybe the stress that you're in right now reminds you of that. Or if you're feeling anxiety, when you ask yourself that magic question, when have I felt this way before? Or when you ask a friend this question, when have you felt this way before? You are practicing something that we call curiosity. It means being a learner. It means opening yourself up to the possibility that there's an explanation for this and that it's worth understanding. When you can be a learner, when you can practice curiosity, it's the opposite of being judgmental. It's the opposite of being critical. And it's opening you up to a much greater insight than you would ever get if all you're looking at is just the present day emotions. When you can take those emotions and you can take those sexual sensations even and ask yourself, when have I felt this way before? It opens up a world of insights that is so, so helpful. That's some of the feedback that you need to have from every time you sexually act out. You need to ask yourself, okay, what's going on in my life right now, possibly related to this? And when have I felt this way before? There is one more piece of feedback, though, that you absolutely need to have if you want to have the growth mindset, if you want to have long-term freedom from porn. And that is the fact that relapse is also feedback about the future. This is a bit of a hard truth. The reality is, if nothing changes as a result of a relapse, it will happen again. If you don't take the time to learn from it, if you don't use this as an opportunity to receive love from God and from other people, if you don't realize what life experiences have been unprocessed for you, that you were subconsciously processing through porn, you're just going to do it again. One of the key aspects of a growth mindset is reflection. It's asking, what happened? What can I learn from it? And what can I do differently? So my question for you, after you've had a chance to examine the present and to examine the past, you can make a plan for the future. What are you going to learn from this relapse? What are you going to do differently? So once you've processed the feedback that your relapse is giving you, what can you do? I want to give you a very easy, simple, doable action step, and that is take a risk. Literally, just take a risk. Do something different. Interrupt the pattern that led you to that place where you don't want to go anymore. Maybe if you were stressed and that was leading up to a relapse, maybe it's time to take some time off. Maybe if loneliness was a part of it, you can buy a pet for yourself, buy a golden retriever, a secure attachment figure that can be there for you when you're feeling lonely. Or maybe you want to turn your depression into poetry. Maybe if you've grown stagnant in your love life, maybe you want to ask someone out on a date, whether you're single or married. And if you feel like you are stuck in a rut, maybe it's time to read a new book, take a new course, join a new group, or find a new coach. We have all of those resources here for you at Husband Material. I'm putting them in links to the show notes. And I also want to remind you to do one more thing, and that is to be patient. I received this encouragement from a member of the Husband Material community named Jason, who shared something that I thought was so, so important on this topic of reframing relapse. He said, what could be more damaging than growing impatient with an individual for his lack of progress? And what could be more of a gift to a guy than to exercise immense patience? Jason said, I'm so thankful for patient men in my life who have not grown exasperated or given up on me. My friend, be immensely patient with yourself and the men in your life who are with you on this journey. Don't give up. Reframe relapse. View it not as failure, but as feedback. Feedback about the present, feedback about the past, and feedback about the future. Remember, relapse is not who you are. failure does not define you. Success does not define you. What defines you is that you are God's beloved Son, and in you, He is well pleased.